Please subscribe, we are almost to 100,000. Well, this is a video that certainly won't make Twitter mad. Hello everyone, Jester Bell, aka Female Frodo Baggins, is here. I just saw the Dune Messiah trailer this morning. I've had a little time to think about it, and I mean, the music and everything made it sound very, very exciting, and all of that. But I want it to be good, and I would really like to watch a movie that's for me, that turns out really well. But I've had trepidations about this movie for a very long time, and the trailer did not do anything to absolve those trepidations. And my nervousness about this film and why I'm worried that it could become a disaster, and why I think there's just been so many unnecessary changes to the story, goes back to the character of Chani. A character that they made great and significant changes to in the original movie, changes that completely uproot, potentially, the story of Dune Messiah, to the point where I don't know where we're going with this film, and I don't know if it's all going to come together. Now, I want to interrupt myself for a minute and correct myself, because I make the mistake all throughout this video of referring to Dune Part 3 as Dune Messiah, when in fact the movie is called Dune Part 3, and it's going to be adapting parts of Dune Messiah and Children of Dune. Despite that, what I say here about what they changed in the story and how that affects everything else still stands. And in this video, I'm going to explore how those changes were not made for creative reasons, but they were made as another adherence to political correctness and ideology, which is words I'm sure you're tired of hearing, but it is the case. Dune fell victim, and I know you're tired of hearing this word too, to maybe a bit of girl bossery. Now, hear me out, and I'm going to explain myself and defend my position here. I'm sure that there are Dune fans seething in the comments already. Let me explain. For those who are unfamiliar, the reason why I would be nervous about the way Dune Messiah is going is I'm questioning, how do you even adapt Dune Messiah given what you set up in the previous film? Because you see, Dune Messiah, the story in the book, general story of Paul and Chani, it's Revenge of the Sith. That is literally what it is, Revenge of the Sith. It's Paul and Chani are trying to conceive a child after their son Leto II was killed in the previous book. I know that didn't happen in the movie, but moving on. They're trying to conceive a child, and they can't because Paul's wife, in name only, it is only a political marriage, and he does nothing to touch her. He treats Chani as his actual wife. But Arulin, played by Florence Pugh in the movies, has been poisoning Chani so secretly so that she cannot conceive a child. Paul has already ascended to be a ruthless dictator in this book, and he starts to have nightmares of Chani dying in childbirth. Sound familiar? And at the end of the book, spoiler, 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 Chani does, in fact, die in childbirth. Once again, sound familiar? Now, this creates questions going into Dune Messiah, if that is the general plot. Chani left Paul at the end of Dune Part 2, and she didn't believe in him as a messiah at all. In fact, she ran off not just because he agreed to marry Arulin for political reasons, but because she is completely against him as the Messiah and believed that the whole prophecy is being used to enslave her people. So, what on earth is the Dune Messiah plot going to be? How are they going to pick this up and reconcile this? And I want to talk about all the changes that they've made here and all the problems it creates in general, because Chani's ending role in the first Dune book is completely different how it ends up in the movie. Her role entirely is completely different. In the book, Chani is supportive of Paul, and she believes in him as the Messiah. That is important. She is a warrior in the books, but she is completely supportive of Paul. And at the end of the books, she has an understanding with Paul. He tells her that his marriage to Arulin, played by Florence Pugh in the movies, is completely in name only. It's for political gain. He makes it clear that he will never touch her or even glance at her fondly. Chani, while her official title is concubine, is his actual wife. And the book ends with a line about that, about her importance here. But that is not how it ends in the movies. Why? Well, Denis Villeneuve and co have told us why. They were concerned about Chani's agency. Now, I really hate how that word is used. It's been so overused in modern day Hollywood and talking about female characters, and it is misused. Agency is the ability to act or make decisions independently. And like I said, this word has been constantly misused and applied to female characters of the past 10 years. First of all, having agency is used as a litmus test for whether or not a female character is well written or not. If she has agency, then she's well written. If she doesn't have agency, then she's not well written. First of all, that is not true. Just as in real life, there are situations where human beings do not have agency, they do not have the ability to make independent decisions, we should watch those situations play out in fiction as well. Yet the word agency, if a woman doesn't have it, is seen as automatically bad in a story. Like Cinderella didn't have agency. No kidding, she didn't. She was an abuse victim in a bad situation in a time where there weren't a lot of options. Not having agency is not inherently bad in a story, but Chani, in a sense, does have agency in the end of the story. It is her choice to agree to Paul's decision here. She understands it and agrees to it. That is her choice. She is a warrior in the books. She does have the ability to agree or disagree with things. She just chooses to follow Paul. Now, agency, talking about fictional characters, have also been used to refer to the act of whether or not the character is making decisions that drive the story or just reacting to them. And in that case, Chani is reacting in this situation. However, once again, this doesn't create any flaw in the narrative. It wasn't a situation where she needed to make the independent decision, and that's another thing. Good and bad writing depends on the context. Is this a situation where this character needed to be the one who initiated this decision, and she needed to be the one that took action other than reacted to it? In this decision in the book, it made sense for Chani to act in support of Paul's decision because he has created an understanding with her about what he is doing. And she, up to that point in the books, was supportive of him, and there was a great love between them. At this point in the books, they had already had a child together. So it made sense all around. The problem is, it just doesn't add up with modern sensibilities, where they use agency and throw that word around to get angry at certain decisions that female characters make. Like, it just wouldn't behoove them to portray Chani as the character who supports Paul and believes in him and accepts his decision to marry this woman, Orulin, for political reasons, in name only, and then in the follow-up movie essentially be the Padme Amidala of the story, who everything is concerned by them having to have a child. That just wouldn't be, it wouldn't add up with modern day sensibilities. So they change the entire thing, and in doing so, change the entire story, so that, in my opinion, as we're gonna see, it doesn't work anymore. Because the dynamic between Paul and Chani in this attempt to give her more agency is completely changed. Once again, in the books, Chani is a warrior, definitely, but she 100% is supportive and believes in Paul. In the movies, they completely change her character so that she is all of a sudden condescending towards Paul, and she rejects the idea of the prophecy. She is a non-believer in the Messiah. She believes that it is a false prophecy that is made to enslave her people.
This prophecy is how they enslave us!
She is the most outspoken one against this idea of a prophecy and a Messiah. And they took extra steps, even in the promotional material of the film, to make it clear that Chani's loyalty is not even to Paul's first. It is to her people first.
I won't be fighting for him. I'm fighting for my people.
And what this does is it completely ruins their dynamic so that now no longer is their romance believable. Once again, all Chani does when she meets Paul is act condescending towards him.
But you look like a little boy.
Sandwalk like a drunk lizard.
In all these scenes, she even stands above him more, acting superior to him, and that she knows more. And for some reason, they fall in love? Wow, just what everyone wants. A love interest who acts condescending towards them and distrusts them and just sees them as an outsider who may or may not bring about a false prophecy to enslave her people. Nothing about this dynamic makes any sense, and they do not have any chemistry. Paul should not be in love with someone who is constantly condescending towards him and sees him as a threat. Likewise, Chani should not be in love with someone she sees as lesser than and condescends constantly and also perceives as a threat. It makes no sense. But they did it to change the dynamic of the book, to adhere to the modern day definitions of agency and the concerns with that in stories. By the way, I never see the word agency thrown around so liberally when it comes to male characters in stories. They're always concerned with the female characters. And what this does is it completely changes the ending and ruins the ending of Dune Part 2 in more ways than one. First of all, you can just see how they're bending over backwards at this ending because the Dune has a very feudal society. It's not ideal, and it's not supposed to be. There are women with a lot of power in the Dune franchise, but it's not in the sort of empowering kind of way that some in the modern day would like to see. Once again, it's very, very feudal. The Bene Gesserit use marriages and sexual relationships all for gain. It's all very transactional. It's not an ideal society, and it's not supposed to be. Because they are too afraid of people seeing this as an objective society that isn't a great place, they have to dance around it. And I noticed this the first time I watched the movie. Arulin, they have to make multiple scenes that make it clear that she is the one agreeing to the decision to marry Paul for political reasons. They work around that so that after he kills Elvis Presley, she steps in when he might kill her father, and she steps up in order to marry him for political reasons, so that now she is the one making an independent decision and stepping up to it, rather than what they, I guess, would perceive as an offense in the book, where Paul is the one who makes the decision.
Spare my father now, and I will be your willing bride. The throne will be yours.
Now, you might argue this doesn't create a big change in the story just to have a little thing like that come in, and I agree, but it is just so annoying to me because once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. How they have to dance around these stories, completely unnecessary, just so the female characters automatically seem independent and seem that they have the most agency in the situation. This perception of how female characters have to be written affects things like blockbusters that are trying to be more highbrow as Dune, and even to things as Super Mario movie, a completely different genres, but you see it there too, and it doesn't matter if it negatively affects the story for you. It's still happening. That is why all the changes to Princess Peach had to happen in the Mario franchise. Peach has always been a strong character, and she's always been a capable fighter, but it was always in a very feminine way. And yeah, she gets captured and rescued by Mario. That's a staple of the games. But they had to change it in the movies so that now Peach is strong in a more tomboyish sense. And Luigi is the one filling in for damsel in distress. And I'm well aware that he has in the games as well, but Peach is the one who gets saved far, far more than Luigi. And in this movie, she has to save herself first before Mario even gets there. Once again, you might say that didn't bother me, those changes happening in the movie, and that's fine. They don't have to bother you, but what I'm saying is they happen regardless of if they bother you or not. There is a certain way that Western entertainment wants to see strong female characters, and Peach was always a strong female character, but they don't associate femininity with strength. So Peach, who is a very feminine and soft-spoken character, needs to become more of a tomboy in this movie. Once you've seen these patterns play out in American entertainment, you can't unsee them, which is my actual problem with even something as seemingly minor as wanting to put an emphasis on Princess Arulin agreeing to Paul's proposal to marry her for purely political reasons. The reason why that bothers me is I've seen it so much. It's kind of a moment where you're watching a puppet show and you can see the strings peek through behind the scenes, or you're watching a stage play and you can see behind the curtain a little bit. All of a sudden, I'm not watching a universe from another world, and I forget that I'm even in the theater or in my home watching a movie. All of a sudden, I'm in the meeting behind the scenes that must have taken place to make sure to emphasize this and make this change here so that no one might get upset with them for the female characters not having enough agency when the movie releases. But yeah, while that might seem like a minor change to the story, this is a more major one. At the end of Dune, like I said, Chani is staying with Paul, and she's going to be his actual wife, even though that's not her official title. And Arulin is going to be his wife in name only. And like he said, he's not going to touch her, and he's not even going to look at her with desire. And he makes good on that in Dune Messiah. And Dune Messiah is all about the politics of this situation where Chani is actually Paul's wife, and they're trying to have another child. And the Bene Gesserit and Princess Arulin have their own agenda of why they don't want that to happen. And that's the entire point here. But the ending of Dune Part 2 changes it so that Chani, who already doesn't believe in Paul as the Messiah and doesn't agree with what he's doing, runs off after he is going to marry Arulin, and there is no understanding taken between the two. And that completely changed, as you can imagine, where we're supposed to end up with Dune Messiah. And then, this is what drives me crazy about how this movie ends. At the end of this movie, what I want to know is how Paul feels about all of this. I want to know how he feels now that he has become the Messiah, and now that he is engaging in a holy war, so to speak. He is the main character of this movie. I want to know how he's feeling at the end of it. But the ending character that we focus in on at the end of this movie is Chani, her scowling at the camera in anger at what Paul has done and what has happened. Now, Denis Villeneuve has defended this ending, saying that the reason why Chani was so against Paul is he really, really wanted the audience to know that Paul's actions were not right, and that to have a character be skeptical of him. And first of all, this is frustrating to me because the Dune franchise is attempting to present itself as more high concept and highbrow, and you're treating your audience as dumb, as if they couldn't understand that Paul's actions are wrong. But also, there are other ways to show Paul's actions are wrong and they're leading to some bad stuff than showing Chani's scowling face at the end of this movie. Do you know what would have been a better way to show us that Paul's actions aren't good? Show us Paul's face. Show us his reaction to all of this. Is he forlorn at what he believes that this holy war that he's decided to start is going to lead to? Does his forlorn face slowly fade to more determination, like he is becoming something different? He is fully assimilating into something more dangerous, implying the dangerous dictator we are going to see in the upcoming film? All of that would imply more about the story and what we are going to see next and continue the narrative floor. And from a filmmaking perspective, it just makes sense to end with a shot of our lead character. But no, we end on Chani scowling, of her abandoning Paul in a move that does not set up what the premise of the next film is supposed to be. Why? Because we were worried about Chani's agency. And well, Denis Villeneuve had said that, and he said other things about the changes made to Chani's characters. To me, it all comes from changing the original character to be something more acceptable by modern standards, because I've seen how characters and female characters are constantly changed to be acceptable to modern standards, supposedly, which is really just a small vocal group of people who these companies feel beholden to, because you could not have Chani as the supportive love interest for Paul. Chani could not be the woman who is just gonna bear his children in the next film. She had to be all of this other stuff, even though the changes they made to reconcile that changed a massive, massive chunk of the story and made it so that a lot of things, like Chani's very relationship with Paul, don't make sense anymore. Now, I hear some people out there saying that all of this is fixed by the Dune Messiah trailer, because we see Chani and Paul together discussing their children in the opening shot of this new teaser. But unfortunately for me, it just makes me ask more questions of, what is this movie even going to be now? Is that scene with Chani and Paul talking about having children, is that from a flashback? I would imagine so. Are we going to open up in the present day with a time jump where Chani somehow got back together with Paul, so a story resembling that of the plot in Dune Messiah can play out? Is it going to open with a scene of Paul confronting Chani after she ran away? He did say in the previous film that she would come around. Is that this scene? And then we're going to have Chani somehow rejoin with Paul and somewhat agree with him, and we have the plot that has to do with their children play out that way? If so, it just seems like a merry-go-round, an unnecessary roller coaster to make it so that Chani does get in the position that she is supposed to be for Dune Messiah. Also, that it would seem that she has more agency in the situation. We nuked the ending of Dune Part 2, so it didn't even seem like it was going to flow into Dune Messiah. Also that we could do some backflips so that Chani seems like she has more agency. And it's got me asking questions of, now that Chani is a completely different character and this played out completely differently, that's going to completely change the dynamic of how such a story as this is going to play out too. So a whole lot of changes has been made to this story and more questions brought up, all because they were trying to be politically correct. And it's amazing to me because yes, the Dune films are blockbusters, but they do present themselves as being more high concept and highbrow, unlike, say the latest Marvel movie or something like that. But the people behind the scenes, despite all this, are still beholding to political correctness and making major changes to the stories based on that. We have all the cast meant for this film ready to go. We have all the technology ready at hand to finally be able to portray a story like this, but we keep tripping over ourselves for political correctness because we're afraid that a small portion of people who might see this movie will not be able to see this society objectively, and they will demand that the female characters be portrayed to their specifications, which is how adhering to a specific ideology can ruin storytelling. It means you can't actually explore things. You can't actually explore the messiness of characters and dynamics as much as you could because you have to adhere to certain specific things. And I have been saying this for years, and I say it again now. As a woman, I don't need every woman in fiction to be a perfect reflection of what I would like. I don't even think this uber masculine girl boss way that they depict women in movies is the ideal. And it frustrates me because it makes me nervous about Dune Part 3. It makes me nervous about what it's going to be. And if they just change this entire story around because they wanted to be politically correct and because they're still afraid of Twitter feminists from 10 years ago coming out of the woodworks to shame them over this movie and adapting the source material. And when I see Chani in this movie, and, she's got a scar on her face and her hair is slicked back and she looks like a uber masculine girl boss once again, and she gets a lot of shots in the movie's trailer, it just makes me feel exhausted. And I wouldn't have felt this way 10 years ago, but it's been 10 years of presenting what is supposed to be the ideal of a female character, someone who is a tough warrior in a strictly masculine sense, which is ironic because apparently masculinity is still what they associate with seeming strong and tough and independent, but femininity is not, as we've seen. That is what makes me feel that Chani might have ruined the Dune franchise. Now, here's the thing. I haven't seen Dune Part 3. For all I know, even if they make a ton of changes to the book, it'll still be a great movie. But I wish that I didn't have all this worry going into the film when I'm questioning how it's going to play out and what the story is actually going to be because they had to make these specific changes. The changes already made me feel like the ending of the first Dune was like getting dropped off a cliff because it didn't flow narratively with who we were left with at the end of the film. And I wish that I didn't have that. I wish that there was more freedom in these films with how they portray female characters, that they didn't have to be concerned about something that is really a non-issue. We don't need every female character to be the pantheon of girl bossery out there. And we don't even have to tiptoe over the whole agency thing either. That is not what creates good, compelling stories. And you might get things that seem more compelling and human if you're not just trying to be politically correct all the time. But that's all I got for you guys today. Let me know what you think about this video, and if you're mad at me, tell me all about it in the comments below. Please consider supporting me on membership or Patreon if you haven't already, and I will see you guys next time.